to our Polaris Quilt Along. My name is Holly, a Knight of String and Story, and it is my job to guide you to quilt with confidence. Y'all, I am so excited for today because we get to start cutting up our beautiful fabric. It is going to be such a great time. Now, if you are here with me live, do go ahead and say hi in the chat. Let me get this open real quick before too many of your hellos scroll on by. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Come on, cute little computer, you got this. Oh, we are gonna need a computer charger. All right, we're gonna pivot for that in just a second. Let me get this up so I can see y'all, and then I'll grab my charger. Look at that, it actually shows that I am live this week. Hello, Lisa, Lydia, and others. Hello, hey, Deanna. Oh my gosh, I love it. All right, I'm gonna grab my charger. I'm gonna be just right behind y'all so you'll be able to hear me as I am doing this. I was hoping we'd have enough computer juice to get through the morning, but that is not going to be the case. That's okay, because it gives all of y'all an opportunity to get on here with me. Hello, Robin. Thank you for the congratulations. Yes, okay, I'm going to indulge myself for just a moment. I will keep it very brief. But so many of y'all were part of my Chicago Marathon journey that I'm gonna indulge all of us in like 30-second story time. I did run the Chicago Marathon over the weekend. It was amazing. We drove up as a family last Wednesday, hence why we did not have our Q&A on Wednesday last week. We had met on Monday. We drove up to Chicago. Hubster was supposed to be out of town the first part of last week, and his trip got canceled because of Hurricane Milton. That ended up being a huge benefit to my race because he was able to do the driving for the drive up, and I'm so thankful. So we had a couple of days of sightseeing. On Saturday, we ran the 5K as a family. I don't think anybody PR'd. We'd all just ran kind of a steady, strong race and had a great time heading from Grant Park out to is that the South Branch, the like left branch of the river, along the river and back ending at Sears Willis Tower. So super fun time. Then hung out in Maggie Daly Park that afternoon, had just a chill day heading into the marathon. Sunday got up, tackled the marathon. I wasn't quite sure what to expect. It was my first marathon. I had a lot of challenges during marathon training, which I feel like is par for the course. Like I feel like, you write your marathon training plan or any race training plan out on paper, right? And then you kind of hope it goes to plan. But I had a twisted ankle. I stepped on 2 stinging insects. That was all the left foot. That was all just this side. I got sick at the end of August. Like there were just a lot of things that I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And I had so many amazing rock stars in my DMs texting me saying, you have to trust the training. Like you've done your work. Like just go have a great time. And that's exactly what happened. So I ran Chicago in 4:15:56. I am so proud of that. That feels like an amazing first marathon time. I had a wonderful race. Felt really great almost the whole time. I had, the normal emotional roller coaster of racing, but nothing real gnarly. The brain gremlins were quiet for the day, and that was really, really nice. And together we raised over $9,500 for Breakthrough T1D. So if you're new around here, my husband and oldest son are both type 1 diabetics. Type 1 is a huge part of our lives. It was such an honor to run with Breakthrough T1D. They are the world's leading organization for type 1 diabetes research. And because of y'all, we raised over $9,500 together as part of this marathon. So thank you, huzzah, it was amazing. All right, let's see. I'm gonna hard pivot because we're gonna head into Polaris, and I see some of y'all saying good morning. Margaret says, I just got home after a 2-week visit with family. I am so glad that you were back home safe, Margot. I was so sorry to hear about y'all's property outside of Asheville, though, and the damage. Oh my gosh, yes. All of y'all who are slowly getting power and water back, I'm so glad for the progress that's being made. All right, today is all about cutting fabric. Now, you have your Polaris pattern. By the way, as a quick review, our Polaris Quilt Along is free. You do, however, need the pattern. So all of this education that I'm doing is the free part. You need to purchase a pattern. So all of y'all have a copy of this, whether it is physical or digital. All right, the jacket's got to go. I'm jumping around too much. I'm warming myself up. What is special about today is that, as you can see by looking at the front of the pattern is that it is written as a 5-color quilt, right? Well, technically it's written as a 4-color quilt. 2 star colors, your cornerstones, and then your background. What we are doing with this quilt along though is taking advantage of the opportunity to discuss working Scrappy. And there's a couple of pieces that play into taking a quilt pattern and making it scrappy. One of them we talked about last week when we talked about how to choose colors for our stars and pairing them all up. You'll see that I have since gone through and made lots and lots of pairings for my really, really big Polaris quilt that I am planning, right? The second part of adapting the pattern comes in the cutting. Now, some of this is a little bit trial and error. I've done this before, so I'm gonna talk you through it, but if you're doing this process on your own with a different pattern, the way that I generally approach it is just make sure I have extra fabric. And I kind of play around until I find a system that works for that pattern. We're gonna talk about some principles of how that might work based on the Polaris pattern. I'm gonna share with you my plan for this, and we're gonna do a little bit of cutting together, okay? This is a wonderful opportunity to ask lots and lots of questions. I am gonna put one big asterisk around a question that I think might come up. I've received a couple of emails questioning the math for the background fabric. I have not had an opportunity to double check my math yet. So if we publish a pattern correction, I will make sure an email goes out. All of our kits came with 2.5 yards of background. The pattern calls for 2 1/4. I'm hoping I did my math right and that our cutting together today will solve any questions that you have. If in the process of my cutting and double checking my math, I find that I made a mistake, we'll publish that correction, we'll send out an email, and you can make the appropriate corrections in your patterns, okay? Awesome. Let's see. Susan says you did so amazing in Chicago. I tracked you the whole way. So proud of you. Susan, thank you. Susan has been an amazing supporter of my running journey. Susan herself is running the women's marathon next month. So Susan, I will be cheering for you from Novi because I will be, up in Michigan at the time. But that means so much. So many folks downloaded the app to be able to watch me run, and that means so much. So thank you. I appreciate it. All right, let's dive into this together. Now, we are making the throw size. This is a total of, the quilt along official size is throw size. Technically, I'm actually making a bigger quilt, but I'm gonna be talking as though I'm making the throw size when we are chatting, okay? And then I'm gonna make extra blocks and put them in there at the end, okay? So the throw size is a total of 30 blocks. It's a 5x6 layout. Behold the throw size. It's a big throw, 60 by 72. But listen, tall people need big throws. People like me who just like to have quilts everywhere need big throws. Those of us who have pets and children who want to share the quilt need big throws. So here we are. Robin says that she needed 3 yards for the background. So yes, I will be checking that math, Robin. I appreciate you letting me know because it's certainly possible I made an error. Math was not my favorite subject. And even though we check and double check, we're only human, right? We're only human after all. Okay, anyway, I'm not gonna, Let's start with a little bit of our background and cornerstone cutting. I'm gonna talk about that first. So we're gonna start with colors 3 and 4, and then we're gonna take a step back and talk about colors 1 and 2, especially for those of us who are doing scrappy things, okay? So my background is still on the bolt. So we're gonna unroll it together. Now let me talk about how these charts work, okay? The cutting instructions are broken into 2 sections. The first section, you are cutting strips of fabric off of the width of fabric. So width of fabric is this here, right? That when it comes off the bolt, there is fabric and it is folded. From selvage to selvage, right? Selvage, through the fold, all the way back around to the other selvage is considered width of fabric. So you're just cutting strips at this first part, okay? The first number outside of the parentheses is the number for the throw size. So if you are making the throw size, cut that many strips. If you are making any of the larger sizes, follow the parentheses accordingly, okay? This can be done really well. Can y'all hear me? Maggie, try turning your audio up. I don't see any other comments about sound, but I just want to make sure. Oh, Christy, I'm so glad you're back in Tampa and that you are safe. Thank goodness. Thank goodness, thank goodness. Okay. Yep, okay. Thank you for the thumbs up. So, will one of y'all type and suggest that Maggie either like exit the live and come back or try turning her volume up? Because I think it's probably Instagram is glitching or her phone is glitching, okay? All right, so I am going to cut several strips here. Now, you could do this with a Stripology ruler. If you ordered a kit or you bought yardage, you can fold it in half, fold to selvage, and then your Stripology ruler will fit across. Because mine is coming off the bolt, I have this nice 8.5 inch wide ruler. I'm just gonna use that for my cutting for the moment. And then I will use my Stripology later, okay? So I go back and forth a little bit. I know some folks who are very committed to like only Stripology cutting. It's just big enough and just bulky enough that I love it for some things and less for others, okay? All right, y'all can hear me. Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, we're gonna start with our 2.5 inch strips. And one of the things that I do if I'm using a regular ruler like this is I multiply, right? So 2.5, 5, 7.5. So I actually start with my ruler at that 7.5 inch mark, and then I can just slide my ruler to my left because I'm right-handed, and I can get a number of really clean cuts without the ruler going over the fabric I've already cut, without having to pick things up and move it out of the way, etc. Okay, now part of the reason that I wanted to start with this, I might need a new rotary blade. We were cutting some hefty fabric yesterday. Listen, we had our marathon special last week. Y'all understood the assignment. Y'all can't quite see here, but I've got a half a dozen plus orders piled on the ironing board. The back table is packed. I've got a table over here that's packed. Y'all understood the assignment on getting your kits, on getting Juicy, on getting Teddy and the Bears. Like, those fabrics are going out the door so quickly. If you want some and you haven't snagged it yet, this is your opportunity, okay? Like, don't miss it because they're going fast. Okay, part of the reason that I wanted to start with this, yes, okay, I had a moment of panic of, was I looking at the right thing? Is I want to comment on the way that I wrote some instructions in this. Okay, so I just cut a portion of my 2.5 inch background squares. I'm now gonna cut a portion. I don't need any 3 inch, I need a few 5.5 inch. These I have to cut one at a time because I'm not using Stripology. If I had my Stripology ruler, actually, you know what? We're down to a small enough piece of fabric. Whoop, let's do it. So this is where, in those 2.5 inch strips, being able to cut 3 at a time with my regular cutting ruler, I do not always bust out the Stripology, okay? But heading into these 5.5 inch strips, my Stripology ruler is going to become much more useful. Now, we shared via email with y'all an entire tutorial on how this ruler works. I'm gonna give y'all the quick and dirty version here. But essentially, you fold your fabric in half, fold to selvage, so that it will fit underneath the ruler. I'm gonna line this up. That first slit is my 0. So I don't want it quite at the edge of the fabric. I want it just a few threads in because I am going to 0 my edge. And then I am lining up my second white line, that's just my personal preference, with the bottom of my fabric here. So I know that this ruler is square on the fabric, okay? Then, let's see if I have any tape handy that I can do this with. Do we have any washi tape? Oh, we have painter's tape, that'll work. Okay. Before I start cutting, I'm going to mark 5.5 inch intervals, okay? If y'all have questions as I'm going over this, by the way, like, feel free to drop them in the chat. I am glancing over there periodically. So I'm gonna put a little blue mark at 5.5, at 11, and then 16.5, okay? If I did my math wrong, yell at me. I always appreciate fact checking on math. Math is hard. Math is hard for all of us. Okay, then this now does not move as I work my way across. I'm gonna hold the edge here. I insert my blade in the little teardrop and I cut the 0. Okay, so I know that I've got a really square edge there. And then I'm gonna put my hand down and hold firmly to cut at 5.5, to cut at 11, and then to cut at 16.5. And that's as far as I can cut with one bit of the ruler, right? So then I can pick that up with both hands, move it over there. There's my little thread from zeroing everything out. And then I have my first 3 strips. Okay. These are gonna become, are these for our geese? I think these are for our geese. My brain is like, what are these pieces for? Let me remember the math, okay? So I've cut some 2.5, I've cut some 5.5. I'm not cutting all of it right now. Again, this is why I still need to double check my math later. But there's a quick and dirty tutorial on how to use the Stripology. Now, one more thing. If I were to be cutting more right at this moment, right, which I've moved my fabric and thus messed it up. But if I had lifted that off, moved those, and then was bringing this ruler back over here, I will sometimes just push down, and where that 0 drops off the edge, then I know that it's butted up against there. But best practice is to trim just a couple threads off that 0 every time so that you know you have a very square piece of fabric, all right? Let's see, I don't see any questions, but I'm gonna double check. Thank you, Gary, I appreciate it. Good morning, Kate, it's good to see you. Now, if you peek ahead ever so slightly to the making the corner units, okay? Then you're going to notice that I have us cut out these squares and then cut out this square and then piece it to a rectangle. And one of y'all very aptly emailed me and said, why didn't you have a strip piece that? If you are doing it like this, right, where you have one cornerstone color and one background color, you can do that. So what you would do is if you look at color 3, right? This is color 3. And we're cutting our 2.5 inch strips to go with this. You could pair the 2.5 inch strips from color 3 with 2.5 inch strips from color 4. Sew them together and then cross cut, rather than having to do little pairs of squares. That works really, really well if you're working entirely from yardage. So that includes those of you who bought kits from me, because we sent you yardage for your background and yardage for your cornerstones. So what that would look like, let me find a width of fabric piece in here. Oh, look how pretty. We're gonna use the Stripology for this one. Oh, except we're taking our selvage off first. We are not gonna decimate the pretty Ruby Star selvage, sorry. Exactly, so there is a strip piecing option here, even though this isn't how I wrote it. Now, keep in mind, and this will probably not surprise y'all, I love a good scrappy finish. This is one of my favorite quilts to make scrappy. So the reason that I wrote it with squares is twofold. One, the very first time I drafted this pattern, I hadn't learned about strip piecing yet. The second time that I worked on this pattern, I have yet to make a non-scrappy version of this quilt. I love this quilt scrappy. So having it written that it is easy to know what pieces you need if you're not strip piecing serves that end. But now let me show you how you can strip piece it if you are wanting that ease, okay? So we line our ruler up here. I'm gonna do my zeros. Now on your Stripology, okay, the squares, mark your 2.5 inches. I know, amazing, okay? So 2.5, 2.5. How many do I need total? One fabric, okay, so I actually only need, so the math I was doing just there, right? Let me let you into my head. Open Holly-Ann's brain. I have 4 fabrics sitting here that I want to use as my scrappy cornerstones, because I'm going scrappy all the way through on this, right? So if I need 8 squares for throw size, that's 2 strips per fabric. So that's the math I was running in my brain of, am I gonna cut all the way across this, yay or nay? No, because I'm gonna also be cutting out of these fabrics, okay? So I've cut a couple of my 2.5-inch strips. And if I wanted to strip piece these, right? What I would do is I would sew, and these with the fabrics are a little bit different, but that's okay. I would sew these together, right? I'm trying to position it so it looks like I sewed it together. Right? Press to the dark side. And then I would subcut 2.5 inches this way to make this combo. Okay, so I mentioned this now and not later in the quilt along when we're actually making these units, because if you want to wait on subcutting your squares out of colors 3 and color 4, you can use this shortcut, okay? So keep that in mind. All right, let's see. Susan says, what color is the background behind you? It is, oh shoot. Hang on, Susan. Let me dig in the brain. Everyday chambray. Sage, maybe? Let me see if I have it written in the listing. Let's see. Oh, we have 2 more Fableism kits that I can add to the shop. Ha ha ha. Heads up, 2 more kits just dropped. We were in the process of cutting. Let's see. We're using Sprout Woven Cenote right now. This particular one was, which is the same color, it's just a different, slightly different texture. This one, I think it was Sage. I'll have to look, Susan. If you don't hear from me, remind me to email you and let you know. It was one of the Everyday Chambray colors, okay? All right, so there's my tips for cutting colors 3 and color 4. Now let's back all the way up to colors 1 and 2, because this pattern is written for there to be 2 of them, which means I've given you the same strip cutting directions. And obviously we're not doing that from yardage, it's gonna look different. So how are we gonna do this, okay? So for color 1 and color 2, remember width of fabric is 42 inches, okay? So if you cut 8 strips, 8 2.5-inch strips like this pattern says, right? That is 8 times 42 is your linear length, right? We're gonna be editing that a little bit in order to make this scrappy, okay? No worries, Susan. Oh, you've already subcut. So, Robin, you just get bonus points for already being on top of your cutting. Like, that's amazing that you're already working on your cutting, okay? All right, so let's talk about what we're gonna do for a scrappy quilt. I don't know why this one is here and not further up in the stack. This makes me feel like it got pulled out of place somehow. Where are you supposed to be? Are you supposed to be here, maybe? Maybe here. Okay. All right. So I have all of my pairings, and instead of cutting a whole bunch of width of fabric strips from each one, we are going to cut just a couple, okay? The goal is to be able to make 2 blocks from each fat quarter pairing. Now I have the added fun little plot twist with mine. Some of mine are fat 8s, not fat quarters. So that'll be fun. All right, like so. Let me peek ahead. I'm gonna do some quick mental math because I wanna make sure. Where's the piece of paper? We're gonna write on the bolt together. Ha 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 ha. Okay. And then, is that all? Nope, then I need rectangles. Hang on. Okay. Let me think. I'm doing my quick and dirty mental math here of what we need from each fat quarter because I'm determining which direction we're going to cut this. Because we need. Oh, that's hilarious. I don't want to say it out loud until I know that I've mathed the math correctly, and so I'm fact checking myself. All right, perfect. I have a plan, but we're going to start with the fat quarters because I'm going to have to get real creative with my fat eighths. Because I'm getting scrappy on mine. Where's my clippy do? Here we go. Hello. Okay. That's the fat eighth too. Where's my fat quarters? Let's give myself a nice clean sample to work with here. Nope, still a fat eighth. I didn't realize it would be this hard to find fat quarters in my piles. Here we go. Nope, still not fat quarters. Come on. That looks promising. Okay, so we are going to cut along our 18-inch. Now, no, I did not press this. I recommend that you press it before you do this, but I'm just demoing and I can press the rest of them before I go. All right, so we need our different strips, okay? The narrowest, that 2.5 inch, we're gonna cut two. We're gonna cut one each of the other widths. And I'm gonna cut along the 18-inch line. One, because I think that's gonna be plenty of fabric for what we need and is gonna leave a little bit more fabric intact over here. Two, it means if you have any pretty selvages, your selvage will stay intact because we all know that the selvages are the rage right now, okay? So what we're gonna do is from each one, and like I said, I'm going from fat quarters here. Some of my fabrics, I have pulled in things like fat eighths, or I have truly like weird shaped scraps. And so what I will do from those is I'll be doing a little bit more tricksy mental math to figure out, okay, for each block, what shapes do I need? That's what I was scribbling down over here, is making sure that I had that accurate in my head. And how can I get them out of that piece of fabric? That is a level of making the pattern scrappy that is just plain a lot more brain work. And it is totally understandable if you never aspire to that level of brain work. The formula, if you will, for that is if you are making a pattern scrappy and you are not working from a piece of fabric that is easily gonna cut up into strips like these fat quarters are, then you wanna look ahead in the pattern and write down for each color what one block takes, okay? That's why on some of my patterns you will see that we include a pillow that is just one block, right? And that's because I've already done that math for some reason with a project that I've worked on with that pattern in the writing process, and I'm sharing that shortcut with you, right? We don't happen to have that here in the Polaris pattern. That's super okay, because it's really straightforward with just 4 colors, okay? So if you are working from truly scrappy scraps, make sure you look ahead and you know which pieces you need for each block, and then figure out how to cut that out of the fabric you have. Does that make sense? I know that's a little bit of like a roundabout way to get to what we're doing, all right? What I am doing here is I'm gonna cut 2 of those 2.5 inch strips and then 1 each of my other 2 width of strips. So these are my narrow strips. This next one we're gonna call the medium strip. Obviously these measurements are in your pattern. So peek in there. We're gonna call, so like I said, the medium strip, and then we'll have our widest strip. Okay, and we're trying to get 2 blocks out of each pair of fat quarters. So in a quilt like this, where there's 30 blocks, there will be 15 unique blocks. All right, So what I did is I jotted down what I need for 2 blocks. And I'm gonna make, I like to call them little block kits, okay? So we need 2 of these widest, or these largest squares. So I'm gonna take that strip and fold it in half. This kind of cutting is much less efficient than yardage cutting, as you can probably already see, right? I'm gonna be generating scraps as we go and setting them off to the side. And it really does mean I have to go block by block as I'm cutting, okay? So put on a good movie or have an audiobook or maybe a good playlist. This is gonna take a second, okay? All right, we're gonna find out together if I mathed my math correctly on, oh, we're gonna need 2 medium strips, I can tell you right now. So 2 narrow strips, 2 medium strips, 1 wide strip. And then you will have some leftover that is plenty wide. Okay, so if you goober this up, you've got some extra to work with. You also have the extra from that widest strip. All right, I'm gonna start a scrap pile. Math for quilting really stresses me out, not gonna lie. You know, Lexi, here's my secret. It's just fabric. It's just fabric. And that's why, you know, I mentioned at the very top of our time together, if you are making a pattern Scrappy for the first time, I strongly encourage just having plenty of fabric. And when I'm making a Scrappy quilt that is a planned Scrappy, right? This wasn't quite that, right? This was actually from scraps, and it literally was just like, I'm gonna see what I can cobble together and how many blocks I can make. But if you've got one of our kits, or if you've pulled fat quarters, you've been following along the last couple of weeks, and you're doing what I've done of like making these pairings, right? And you're planning your Scrappy, just have plenty of fabric, and know that like if something goes wrong, like grab another fat quarter from your stash, right? We do this for fun, for joy. Y'all have heard me talk about this 1 million times. And the reason that I keep talking about it is because part of the creative process is getting messy and making mistakes, okay? What is it that Miss Frizzle said? Like, get ready, let's get messy, make mistakes, and how am I messing this up? All of the Magic School Bus that I have watched and all of my life, anyway, y'all get my point, right? If it is so clinical that the math is perfect every time, and the cutting is perfect every time, and the piecing is perfect every time, it takes some of that creative magic out of it. And that's what I like about making a quilt like Polaris Scrappy, is that it puts a little magic back in, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna knock my own pattern for a second, right? Like this cover quilt is not my favorite, right? It's a little stale and clinical, right? And it's wonderful because it shows you the shapes, it shows you the colors, it serves its purpose, but there's a reason why like that's the one that I pieced, right? Because I like to put that little creative magic, that unpredictability back into it, all right? So 2 of these medium strips, we need 8 of these squares. You notice I've turned my ruler, so that I can just slide down and make all these cuts. We're testing my skip counting ability. All right. Good morning. Someone was a bedhead this morning. I love that. Lexi, I'm glad that that reminder helped. Lydia does love quilt math. I can co-sign that. She is very, very good at quilt math. It's slightly terrifying to some of us how good at quilt math you are, Lydia. And that's the other thing, is remember that if you are like me and quilt math is maybe not your spiritual gift, even though you love the design element of quilting, there are always quilt math people around you that will help. And if you're really blessed, you have nice quilt math people around you that are like, hey girl, like, you counted wrong. Try again, and not like, you're the worst, how could you make a mistake, right? Y'all are all lovely quilt math people. Is my video frozen for all of y'all? It's not frozen for me. Maybe try hitting refresh, Robin. It might be a glitch, okay? Okay, and then these are rectangles that we need out of this. Notice I'm lining my strips up on the grid of my mat. Let me math in my head for a second, okay. And I'm cutting both strips at once. They're not stacked right on top of each other. They're offset slightly, but I can still cut right through, okay? So I've now cut all the pieces for two blocks out of one color. All right, and I'm gonna repeat that on the other color. And this time, now that I've done the math, I can say it out loud a little bit more clearly for y'all, okay? So if you're working from 5/4, you need 2 of the narrowest strip, 2 of the medium strip, and 1 of the widest strip. And I am cutting, like I said, along the short side of my fat quarter, the 18-inch side. I'm gonna use my Stripology this time, see if I can do it without messing up my math, because I want to square off this edge. I'm doing it on the 18-inch side to leave my selvage intact. All right, so narrowest, medium, widest. All right, so 5 strips, like so, okay? And we're starting our pile of scraps. All good now, I'm so glad. Okay. Then I can go the other way. And I'm not gonna use my Stripology for this because it's so big, but I am gonna trim this edge to make sure it's square. I recently was in Lebanon, Tennessee for OSQE, Original Sewing and Quilting Expo. If you were there, shout out, we had such a good time. Some of y'all took my Dogwood Blossoms class at Lebanon, and we were talking about cutting, and it was an entry-level class, and we were really just focusing on the very basics of understanding how to cut out some funky shapes. And my students in that class, kept asking how obsessively they should square things up, right? And in that context, I was like, you know what? No, I said out loud 2 of the medium strip, and I did not cut 2 of the medium strip. In my defense, I am cutting and talking at the same time. And my students were a little surprised that I was not more of a stickler for perfect squaring up of things. Let me explain why. We were making Dogwood Blossoms, where the block is 18 inches, and the units finish at 6.5 inches. They are huge. I goobered that too, didn't I? Yep. Cutting and talking is not my friend today. It's gonna be okay, because we have plenty of fabric. I'm so glad that we already had a chit chat together about it's not gonna be perfect. Because here we are, and it's not perfect. With Polaris, this is an opportunity to practice precision. Now, I'm gonna give you a little chat about precision, and also, I guarantee you there will be some point in this quilt along where I go, psh, close enough is good enough. Please notice the fact that I'm cutting unironed fabric right now, right? Like, all things in moderation. Yes, okay. But the point of me bringing this up is to say, with smaller units like this, precision is going to matter more, right? Even this throw, as we get into our 1/4-inch seams when we start sewing next week, right? If your 1/4-inch seam is off by a 1/16 of an inch, that will be noticeable. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, 24. You're going to lose like an inch and a half plus across the width, right? So if your quarter inch seam is a 1/16 of an inch too deep, you know, if it's actually a quarter plus a 1/16, which one is that, 5/16? I was like, hold on, fractions. Now we're doing fraction math. Your quilt, instead of being 60 inches wide, will be 58.5 inches wide, give or take, okay? Now, this is not a huge deal in the grand scheme of, Havana, thank you. This is not a huge deal, Havana. This is not a huge deal in the big scheme of life, the universe, and everything, right? Like a quilt that is 58.5 inches versus 60 inches is still going to be lovely and warm and cozy and beautiful, and you did an awesome job. My point is that it is a good opportunity to practice precision if that's something that has been on your radar that you want to be working on, and that little things are going to add up in this quilt, okay? So keep that in mind as we're going along. And we're gonna talk together about how to be as accurate as we can, right? That is the whole point of this whole session on cutting, is talking about some best practices so that your cutting can be as accurate as possible, because the more accurate your cutting is, hence me squaring up the edges of all those pieces, right? I'm like, I can't afford for one of these pieces to be a 1/16 of an inch off, because then I'm gonna start losing ground in this quilt before we even start piecing, okay? Excuse me. My allergies are in full form right now. I do not like it. Okay, set those aside, set those aside. You'll notice I'm stacking up my pieces. So here's all of color 1. I'm now working on color 2, right? I'm stacking these up. And I'm gonna make little kits, essentially, is what's happening there. My brain paused for a second, my apologies. Let's see. One of y'all says, I love that you are not perfect, and share that. Listen, I'm a huge proponent of not being perfect. I quilt for the fun and joy of it. And also, knowing when precision matters can be a valuable part of the process. It's all about balance, right? It's a both and. I am cutting for 2 stars right now. So I am cutting color 2 for 2 stars. Great question. So see right there, trimming up those edges, you know, those are just little bits of fabric, but they're gonna matter in a quilt where there's a lot of seams. The more seams there are in your quilt, the more precision matters, because there's more opportunities for fabric to get lost. Now notice, all of this cutting that we're doing, we have extras from all of those strips that we cut. So if you make a mistake, you're gonna be just fine. You've got plenty of fabric to make it up, all right? So, for cutting your background, I will get back to y'all on if my math was incorrect, per some requests that I've had to double check our background yardage. For cutting those background pieces, if you have a Stripology, that's gonna help a ton, because it's just a lot of repeated cuts. That's color 4. For color 3, our cornerstones, if you are using all yardage, you don't have to subcut those into squares. You can piece those strips with background strips and then subcut to get this unit. If you've already subcut it all into squares, that's okay. You're just gonna have a chain piecing bonanza as we get along in this, okay? If you are doing a scrappy cornerstone situation, just cut the longest strips that you can to be able to pair them with some background strips, and do that strip piecing where possible. For cutting colors 1 and 2 out of a scrappy conglomeration of fabric, specifically fat quarters, that's the easiest way to do this. Last week we talked about pairing up our fat quarters so that we have a color 1 and color 2 for each block, or for each, of 2 blocks. Again, in a 30 block quilt, you're gonna have 15 unique blocks. So we're gonna cut 2 blocks worth out of color 1 and 2 blocks worth out of color 2. I was cutting along the 18-inch side of my fat quarter to leave my selvage intact, and I cut 2 of our narrowest strip, 2 of our medium strip, and 1 of our widest strip, and then subcut, okay? You need, where's my notes? You need 2 of those biggest squares, you need 8 of those medium squares, and then the rectangles, you need 4, okay? And that's enough. If you do that out of color 1 and color 2, then you've got enough to make 2 blocks with those colors. Does that make sense? There's our recap. Hopefully, this leaves you feeling more set up to take what we did last week of making all of those pairs of fat quarters, start cutting them up, and get ready for our piecing next week. All right? Last call for questions. We covered a lot of ground. We all have a lot of cutting to do this week. As always, this video is going to be linked on our Quilt Along page. It will be here on my Instagram, and I'll push it up to my story so it's easy to find. I will also put in my stories all of the blogs for this week's resources, so it's easy for you to tap through and find those. All of those will be archived in a couple of places. They'll be archived in the Polaris story highlight on my Instagram profile. They will be archived on the Polaris Quilt Along page on our blog. And then we are also making a playlist of these videos over on YouTube. So lots of places to be able to catch the replays of this, to go back and review if you need to, and don't hesitate to reach out with questions if you have them. Robin asked a very important question, and I am so glad that you asked this right here at the end. This is a perfect note to wrap up on. Robin says, do you obsess over how to cut directional fabric? No, I do not. Because here's the thing, however it lands, at some point, no matter, whichever side of the quilt you're sitting under, something will be right side up to you and something will be upside down. I do not obsess over directional fabric. I don't have a ton of directional fabric in this quilt. Interestingly, I have a few stripes. The fish are a little bit directional. I don't have a ton, but no, I will not obsess over it. And you'll also notice these grids, anywhere that these look like they matched up, that's on accident. I did not obsess about pattern matching either. You can see it here in these stripes. These stripes do not match up. And there are some places, let's see if I can find a good one. Like here, right? Like these stripes are going vertically. These stripes are going horizontally. Those are on the diagonal. Okay, so I do not mess with directionality in this. I consider that to be part of the personality of a scrappy quilt. If that is gonna make you nuts, I recommend picking fabric that is a little less directional. Or just embrace it for this one quilt and see if maybe it turns out better than you pictured. All right? Great question, Robin. Someone says, the more you do, the more you learn, the better you get. I love that. Love that. Perfect. Y'all, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Happy cutting as you work on your Polaris quilt. I am so excited to start sewing everything together next week. Bye for now. Oh, hang on. I just saw one more follow-up question. So before I end my video, encore! Where did you ask your questions, Amy? Yeah, Amy, where did you post your questions? Because I missed them. I did not see them. And I want to make sure that they get answered. I hope you hadn't already logged off. Plot twist. Let's see. I'm just waiting patiently because I want to give Amy a chance to type. Okay, so Amy, I didn't see them because I'm not sure where they're posted. So will you go ahead and ask them here and I can answer them before we wrap up? Yeah, the best place to ask questions live is going to be here, or you can direct message me. That's another option too if you want to ask questions here on Instagram. But what questions did you ask that I didn't answer? I know learning Instagram for the first time can be hard. There's a lot going on. Learning new social medias is not my favorite either. All right, I'm clipping these together, by the way, to finish that thought that I started 17 times as we were chatting. This is now what I call a block kit. So I have 2 blocks worth of fabric here, and I leave them clipped together. You notice I didn't separate them by size. I'm not gonna put like, you know, all of my big squares for all of my backgrounds and everything. I want everything to stay paired up, how I decided to pair those together, okay? Amy, if you find those questions later, if you wanna ask them, leave them either as a comment on here once I get this posted as a video, or you can send me a direct message, or you can send me an email. Okay, there's lots of great ways to get a hold of me. Oh, see, it was a design question we'll figure out. Okay, perfect. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate you. I'm so excited for our quilt along, and I will see you back next week. Bye for now.